house for Julio. So,
right.
And then I saw the AMAC. I said, okay, this is great, but
It had 12. It had 12 auxes.
Yeah.
Four more stacked pairs or something, right?
Yeah. Lots of reverb sounds,
Yeah. The best part of it was when Rupert would talk to you and say, a little more, a little more.
Yeah, right.
A little more.
I never had the patience to actually use his voice. I would just use the screen, but it was quite the cool thing.
When you say a little more, it reminds me of my sex life. I've always heard that, but we're live now. And so for those people who weren't in the Zoom room when we started, you are now catching the tail end of what we were talking about on YouTube and Facebook. So you should come in early. If you need the link, you know how to find it. And this is welcome everybody to where we are dry and warm here. Hopefully everybody's dry and warm and safe and calm at the SoundBroker Mastermind Roundtable. This is our 39th one. I don't have enough fingers to show you exactly 39. You're going to have to use your imagination. But here's a safe place to come. It's better than therapy. I realize now so many people are telling me that they come and they enjoy the people that are in the room, and it's an opportunity to talk to like-minded people. And I said to myself, wow, this is like therapy, but it's, and I didn't want to say it's cheaper than therapy because, it's just better than therapy. Of course, it does cost less, so it's less expensive and also less filling. So where did we hear that before? Anyway, so this is a place where we all come together, talk about what's going on in our industry, how we can survive these tough times so that when COVID disappears, we are all back and we are surviving and doing the things that we love to do the most. With that in mind, just keep in mind, everything that we say today is an opinion. You need to fact check us. That's all I could say. Fact check everything you hear, but we're going to get wild and rowdy. And if you want to join us, just put some comments on Facebook or YouTube. And if somebody happens to monitor it, we'll answer your questions. Other than that, welcome everybody. So how is everybody's week gone? Ken, how are you doing?
Best week ever. Started with President's Day, got better from there.
Valentine's Day, right? Would you be my Valentine?
No.
I got my second shot on Valentine's Day. That was
good for you, David. All right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something. I got a gift on Valentine's Day, and I wanted to say it last week. It's from Katz Delicatessen. And if you don't know what Katz Delicatessen is, in New York City, it's one of the oldest delicatessens in all of Manhattan. And it's a highlight. There was Stage, there was Carnegie, and there was Katz's. Katz was on the Lower East Side. And the food is delicious. Corned beef, pastrami. And I got a Valentine's Day care package with a pound of corned beef, a pound of pastrami. And I want to thank Michael Scher for sending me that. He's a married man. Don't get the wrong idea, everybody. But it was a beautiful gift. And I love, I don't know if you guys like kosher pickles, but I've been trying to find kosher pickles everywhere in Las Vegas. And I thought I found a really good one. And I was really enjoying it until I got these pickles from Katz's Deli. And then I realized there is no comparison whatsoever. How's the deli where you are in Nashville?
There ain't much of a deli here in Nashville. I just miss Carnegie Deli. Let's go back to New York and have lunch.
Yeah. Kevin, do they have delis where you are?
Nothing like Katz. You were making me hungry there.
Anybody remember the sign in the window at Katz's?
Send the salami.
Send the salami to your boy in the military?
Yes. And Jan, the funny thing is, we were talking about Prince earlier. I don't know if you remember Mo Morrison.
I do.
When he was the production manager, I spoke to him pretty frequently, and all he would say is there is no food out here for Hebrews. The bagels suck if you can find them. There's nothing. I went to Katz's Deli and I sent him like this 3-foot salami. And he said the highlight of his day, he kept it locked in his work box. And every day at 4 or 5, whenever it was snack time, he'd whip out a knife, carve up a couple of pieces. And that was his, that was a little slice of home, sitting there in the middle of Minnesota with the crazy guy.
Yeah, Mo is a good man. I work with him a little bit on Prince. He came and went he was like a consultant for us at Glam Slam.
He was? I thought that was the other guy, Skip something.
No, Mo was involved too. Mo.
Oh, that's funny because didn't Mo used to work for John Shear?
Mo worked for John Shear for quite a long time. That's pretty much where he started.
Right, that's where I know him from. And
tours.
how about that?
Yeah, I don't think he ever showed up. I think he was just giving me advice on the telephone on what to do, what not to do, and how to stay out of trouble.
By the way, just since we're on the subject, and may Mo rest in peace.
Mo is no longer living. What happened? He wasn't that old, was he?
He had pancreatic cancer. I mean, just terrible.
Sorry to hear that. Oh,
so
sorry to hear that.
Mo was on the why am I drawing a blank? MC Hammer, his final big tour, and they were at the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and they must have had 25 buses, 20, 30 trucks. And so I happened to be in the area. So he said, come by and see him. I walk in the door, and the first thing I see is a huge pile of gear just sitting there. And it didn't really make sense since it was late in the day. But I looked closer. The tour was called Too Legit to Quit. And everybody had X'd it out and wrote on it, too much shit to fit. And when I found Mo, he said, there's the budget is cut. They won't cut any posers or hangers on, but they'll just they'll beat up the vendors and send the gear home.
I worked on that video. I worked on the Too Legit to Quit video. Morris Leiter hired me to provide the sound for that, and they wanted it so big that they took every box that we had at A1 Audio at the time, and it still wasn't big enough. So we ended up getting dummy boxes with Marshall cabinets and sticking them up on the wall. And he spent so much money that I knew that they would regret it one day. And of course, that record just didn't do very well. And of course, today, I'm sure he'd rather have all that money back.
Oh, yes.
And speaking of shows and speaking of interesting shows, so there's going to be some pop-up shows in New York. Cuomo announced that there's going to be like 300 pop-up shows. There's somebody, Eric, that affects your market because you're probably going to be providing some equipment on those shows.
Other than it being announced, remember, New York State is a pretty big state. So when they talk about 300 shows in New York State, that could be 10 in New York City. I'm sure they'll be spread out all over the state. But other than that, I haven't heard a peep on this. Nobody's talking about it. I haven't seen any chatter anywhere on it.
What kind of shows are we talking about, Jan? Music shows, obviously, but or Broadway shows or what?
A combination of all art shows. They called it pop-up shows. I put a link in the chat, but basically they're saying that they were just going to do 300 pop-up shows, and they would come out. They would be outdoors, and they would be open to the public, and the state would be supporting them.
Supposedly,
I hope
there's
that's
a Broadway component to it. There was supposedly, I don't know if it's part of Cuomo's plan, but I've been hearing discussion about a fairly significant Broadway initiative to be able to do snippets of shows outdoors.
Kind of like they did on that TV show they did. Did you see the TV show that they did based on Broadway shows? I think it was an NBC thing. Tina Fey was like the hostess, and they did a lot of numbers from Broadway shows, but in the street. They did it in the street in front of their theater instead of in the theater. Kind of bizarre, but it was entertaining.
Well, something supposed to be in Central Park, and I know POG obviously would be involved since they've got so much of that business. But other than that, I've heard nothing. I hope it brings business to everybody. But
yeah, I just hope it's a sign that we're sort of ramping up. I want to see us ramp up and get back to people feeling okay to get together in gatherings. And gather in groups. Because it feels like it's going to, the way I feel right now, I feel like it's going to be years before people are going to be comfortable gathering in groups. But I hope that's not true.
Well, I would hope so too, because Dr. Fauci has said that we should be back more or less to a way of life by July, if they can get the vaccines out. Now they're increasing the vaccine dosage And a lot of people now are starting to get the vaccine. And I just found out that Nevada is going to be going into the second tier within a week or two, which will allow me to get the vaccine. So the more vaccines into people's arms, the faster we're all going to get back into action. What is it going on? What do you hear in your state, Kevin? What's going on in Delaware?
The second round of vaccinations for the first tier starts this week. They've moved the vaccine. They had really a lot of trouble with distribution places. They were doing it all on the weekends, and it was just huge cattle calls and all kinds of problems. So they've moved it to Dover Downs International Speedway, which is kind of centrally located in the state, and it's going to be a 6-day event starting Monday. I know my parents will get their second vaccine next week. So then as soon as that's done, that 6 days is over, then they go to the second tier. So
what about in Nashville, Kenny?
I think they're still just putting stuff out. I haven't seen much. I saw that we're at like a 12%, vaccine rate already of people getting them. So I haven't heard much more other than that. We've been locked down. We've had ice storms came in Saturday night. We've been in ice, had nothing but ice and not above like 20 degrees since Saturday. So Nashville is pretty much shut down at the moment.
Is it as bad as Houston right now? I spoke to somebody in Houston today. They had their pipes broke to their house. The neighbors' pipes broke. They haven't had electricity in 3 days, and they haven't had water in 4 days. I mean, that's amazing.
Ken, is that normal? Is that normal this time of year, Ken, or is that extreme? This
is an extreme year. This is colder than we've been for quite a while. But usually if we get down into teens for overnight and then back up, we're good. But sitting down at, 10 degrees to 12 degrees, I think today the high was only 17. So, and then we're sitting at about between the ice, and then we had sleet for that, and then ice again. So we're sitting with about 2.5 inches of covering of ice. At least if it had all been rain and ice, it would have been rough on trees and electric lines. But with the sleet time, it helped a little. And now we're starting into snow. We're supposed to get a couple inches of snow tonight. So it's just kind of dragging on.
What's happening in New Jersey, Eric?
It's been cold. There's another 8 or 10 inches of snow coming tonight, and then it's supposed to snow again on the weekend. Some winters there's almost nothing. This seems to be the winter when it just keeps pounding everybody. It's in the yesterday was in the 40s. Tonight it's going to be in the 20s. Chris, is it snowing in Miami, or is it just cocaine?
Well, there was some over at the Mutiny Hotel a little while ago, I saw. But, it's been like 80 degrees down here, and the Proud Boys have been taking care of getting everybody inoculated. So we're in great shape down here. Thank you very much for asking.
The Proud Boys? Good. Are you serious?
Yeah, it's all coming out of Mar-a-Lago and West Palm Beach. Okay.
Yeah, and your governor is running for president. I hear he's an amazing guy.
Oh wow.
But unfortunately, their biggest fan, may he rest in peace, is Rush Limbaugh. And another voice has bit the dust. I mean, what the left won't do to silence the right? Unbelievable. That was a joke. Remember, fact check everything I say. All right. So who else wants to, what's going on in the vaccine department down there in Florida?
Here?
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not old enough. I don't know.
So what's the
My
age
name's on
group
a
they're
list, and they, I hope to maybe get it sometime, but if I was a medical worker, they seem to be doing pretty good with it. And all the folks that I know that are older than me have successfully gotten both shots and are feeling much more confident. They're actually going out in public and enjoying life.
That's good.
Yeah. But, as far as when I'm going to get mine, I'm not sure. I don't know how many counties to sign up in. I'm thinking at least 2. So, maybe by July I'll have mine. We'll see.
And
Yeah.
Bruce, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Last week I went on the county site and signed up. It was about a week's wait, and there was a bunch of open slots at Rite Aid because all the qualifying pharmaceuticals, stores, drugstores are doing it now too. And there was quite a few open slots a week ago for my time frame. I think I'm 10 o'clock on Tuesday. And I'm sure there isn't now, but they look like they were booking about a week out. And I just got note from a friend of mine that Hanson Dam, where they have, cattle call, that like people weren't showing up for their appointments, which I found very strange. But so I get mine on Tuesday, first one.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I heard that when, especially like, just to paraphrase what happened in Houston, they had all of these vaccines ready to go, and they had 1,000 vaccines that were going to spoil. So they called up the local hospitals, the local doctors, and they said, "Hey, who do you know that could take a shot?" And they got rid of 1,000 shots without one of them spoiling. And I know down in Los Angeles that the pharmacists that have appointments for people to come see them, and they don't show up, the pharmacist will call around to somebody, say, "Hey, do you have anybody in your family that's over 65 that needs a shot? Come up, send them down." And so they are doing their best not to waste any shots.
Right. What I was told was a few days last week, they had a lot left over at the end of the day over at Hanson Dam, which is a few miles from my house. And people were lining up who weren't ready for appointments yet, but they don't want the stuff to go bad and go to waste. So once they get to a certain point, they're just letting whoever's there in, because, better shoots,
Oh, you mean,
makes total
Bruce,
sense.
you mean like regardless of their age group or whatever? Really?
Yeah.
Like maybe younger people are getting them
Yep.
sooner than they should. But that's
Right.
great to
But
use it
they're
instead of throwing it
showing
out.
up, right? They're showing up at the end of the day and waiting for a slot. It's kind of like going to see when you're working in New York and you go to a Broadway play and you wait till 2 hours
Right.
before the play starts to get your reduced ticket because they didn't sell the
Right.
thing out, kind of like that.
Right. So the question I have for those people is, are they going to get their second shot on time? I mean, what's the chances?
I don't actually know. I would think that they kind of have to, because once you get your first shot, then you're, you have to do it within a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I would hope that the system would allow them to get their second shot in the correct time frame.
Well,
Yeah,
you get your
I'm
card.
going to Rite Aid.
You get your card, and your card says your next appointment is in 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it is. So,
Well, I don't know about where you are, but I didn't actually get an appointment. It just gave me a date range between this date and this date. I need to make an appointment.
Well, what I understand is that what David said is accurate. Once you get your first shot, then they put you in, you already get into the queue for the second shot. That's what I understand to be true.
Yeah, that's what I've heard also.
Yeah. What
Other
about in
people might know
Louisiana?
about it.
And who's our representative on the ground in Louisiana? That could be Steve Sluter. What do you know? I get the hand. Hey, is that what it is? I get the hand?
Better than just one finger.
Yes, that's right.
There it is. Damn.
And you call yourself a production. Oh,
Jeez. I should get a new computer, I guess.
Still hungover from last night?
Yeah. Yeah, we had a non-Mardi Gras yesterday. Of course, it was probably the coldest day of the year for us too. It actually got down in the 20s, but now it's up in the 50s already. So we're going to get some rain, and it's going to drop back in the 30s tomorrow. And as far as the shots, I'm waiting on my second one. March 3rd is my next date. So 65 and over seems to be there's enough vaccine out there for everybody, it looks like.
yeah. Now, speaking of Mardi Gras, I saw on TV that instead of doing floats, people are doing their houses to look like floats.
House floats.
What do you think of that?
I thought it was pretty cool, man. Some of them spent a lot of money, much more than I have.
What did your house look like?
My house? Oh, nothing. I didn't do anything.
Just put some gel over your outdoor light. That's it, your porch light?
I didn't even do that. I would have been down at the camp fishing if the weather was good, believe me. Avoid the crowd.
So now I'm hearing that there are some shows coming up. Like, for example, there is a show called the Watch the Country Stars for the Island Time Music Festival from February 24th to the 27th. And I believe that that's happening in Ireland. Is that correct? But it's a country music show. Does anybody know about that? Kelly Picker and Kyle Jacobs are hosting that. And Vince Gill is like the headliner with Lee Bryce, Jake Owens. And the money is going to help homeless children and disabled mentally children in Mexico. Has anybody heard anything about that?
It sounds like a TV show, right, Jan?
No. Well, it's a virtual event, but it is happening. But closer to home, I think that we've got the AMAs. Now, I thought Dick Clark was no longer with us, but evidently Dick Clark is producing the AMAs down in Nashville, and they're doing it in 3 venues, Ken. The Ryman, I believe they're doing it in the Grand Ole Opry, the Bluebird Cafe. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, they did something like that last year, whatever. It's like a taping setup. So at least I'll get some work out of bands that are playing on it, at least to do rehearsals and stuff to go tape their song. It'll be kind of a put together, not really a award show type. It's going to be just a segments put together.
Mm-hmm. So does anybody know of any live shows that are happening? Is anybody in this room aware of any live shows going on with his audiences?
Yeah, that Christian artist that I mentioned last week. What's that guy's name again, Ken?
Toby Mac.
Toby Mac
has been doing shows in Texas, Florida, and maybe some other places.
I got a couple others starting up. There's a few other it's more Christian stuff's coming back. I've got like 5 shows tentatively on a schedule for Easter weekend.
There's a theatrical tour I just was told by a friend of mine in the trucking business. We're just emailing and shooting the shit a little. And I just said, has your phone rang in the last year? And he said, believe it or not, it's got an 8-truck off-Broadway production on the books for early June. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but he said, so far it seems to be pretty high confidence level that it will. I'm curious to find out as it gets closer what they're going to do in terms of capacity and audience reduction. And I'm sure I'll talk to him again because I talk to him often and see if he's heard anything as to what their plan is.
Are you talking about Frank Stetler?
No, I wish it was Frank Stetler because then I'd be doing that tour.
Oh, okay.
Well, it just seems to me right now, like as we were mentioning last week, that Garth Brooks is selling out and some other big artists are selling, and people don't want their money back. But there is a situation where the major concert promoters are out there now selling tickets again for shows. Has anybody been contacted at all about any kind of production work down the line? Anywhere near in the pipe? Anybody?
Yeah, so Jan, I heard a stat. I was on a call, a webinar or whatever this week, and they said that 82% of people that have concert tickets don't want their money back. They want to hang on to the tickets and wait for a new event to happen. 82%, really, really high.
That is an amazing statistic. I also heard something like 75% of all people that use statistics don't know what they're talking about at all.
I bet the stockholders of Live Nation really appreciate that statistic.
Right? Oh yeah,
right.
Including the new owners from Saudi Arabia. I think it was Saudi Arabia. So they've up their Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Now so 5% or so of those 82% is helping Saudi Arabia.
Isn't that great?
They put in $500 million, is my understanding, into Live Nation.
Yeah, at one point that was about an hour's oil production.
Yeah. Well, now the price of oil, at one point, the price of oil went down so low that they had to pay people to take it away, which is pretty amazing to me if you think about it, and yet the price of gas they weren't paying for you to take it. You had to still pay for the gasoline that you were putting in your car.
Well,
which is kind of
looking,
interesting.
I am looking forward to the marketing campaign that Live Nation or AG or whoever this, that's going to put on shows is going to launch at some point. To try to get people to be comfortable with going back to doing to attending shows, right? Because there's going to have to be some marketing level of, hey, it's cool. Let's come and see a show. They can't just say come and see a show. There's got to be something to entice the customers to come see a show, don't you think?
The liability is still a huge looming issue. That's not going away.
Yeah, but I think I heard early on, and this may be incorrect now, so it's probably stupid to say, but I had heard early on that since you can't trace where you contract a particular virus from, since it's not traceable, that the liability is not so great.
I would think
totally
that,
agree.
Yeah, I would think that it's very difficult to figure out where you got it from, because people who are very careful and still come down with it, I ask them, well, how did you get it? And they don't know, And the other thing about COVID, which is a really interesting phenomenon, is that just because you get COVID doesn't mean you're going to die from COVID, or for that matter, even get sick. So there's a range of getting COVID, depending on who you are, from just getting, not even knowing you have it, to the dying. And that's what makes it, frightening, because the unknown is always the most frightening thing there is.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that.
Yeah. So, I would prefer to have 2 shots in my arm than not have any shot in my arm. But there's still people that are not going to go get shots, and as an industry, we have to figure out what we're going to do about that. And I would think that today Kevin mentioned that he heard when we were talking about dogs were sniffing out the people who have COVID on the line. And now there's rapid testing that's coming along the lines, so that people will be able to do rapid testing very, very quickly. And there'll be apps and there'll be passports of digital passports, whether you'll be able to show whether or not you've had your shots, or whether or not you're negative, very quickly. Right now, think about what's going on. Just if you wanted to go to, let's say, Canada, now they want you to have a test before you can cross the border to show that you're negative.
I thought you weren't even allowed in, period.
Well, Canada is now requiring a COVID-19 negative test at any land crossing, any border that you want to cross. So obviously they're letting you in. Whereas countries like Thailand, you have to go and be in quarantine. You have to take a test 72 hours before you go, and then you have to be quarantined for 14 days. So, but that can't go on forever. That just can't go on forever. Like, for example, Delta, they decided that they weren't going to do any testing for people to fly domestic. You don't need to be tested. You can just get on a plane.
My brother, his wife is Canadian, and they went up for 3 months. Just got back like 2 weeks ago. And when they crossed the border, they had to have COVID tests showing within the last 3-4 days that they were negative, and they had to rent a cabin in the middle of the woods and quarantine for 2 weeks before they could do anything. And they own a condo up there. They couldn't even go to it. They had to be out in the middle of nowhere. So then they were there for 3 months. Everything went fine. And the government called them every day, supposedly. That's what he said. Pretty much like clockwork.
I wonder if the Mars rover had to take a negative test before they got to Mars. Which, does anybody know if they landed today? Could you believe it? We've got a rover on Mars. Does anybody know anything about that?
Lands tomorrow.
It lands tomorrow. That is pretty impressive, don't you think? That to have a vehicle going, and not only that, they have plans to bring it back too, is right? Because they're planning on getting moon. Well, it wouldn't be moon rocks; they would be Mars rocks, right? And they think that there might have been life on Mars.
Yeah, there's also a drone as part of that system. There's a helicopter drone that will be able to fly low altitude around Mars.
Going to be a hell of a thing to try to control it with the latency between here and Mars, though.
Yeah, but with the Intel RealSense cameras, Ken, it'll never crash.
Oh, is that true? Really?
Well, they have that in drones, so they will not run into trees. They won't run into things.
Cool.
Yeah, the drone
I've
technology has
seen
come a
demos.
long way.
Yeah.
I forget how long it takes for a radio signal to get from Mars to here and back. Do you remember? But it's not quick.
I am assuming that it was pre-programmed. The question is I wonder what type of power they're using to power the drone with. And I would think that it wouldn't be normal batteries because it would have to be some other
It
feature.
would go without saying that it's got to be solar based because the sunlight is virtually everywhere in the solar system, right?
It might be nuclear based as well.
Or it could be based on COVID vaccine, and that's why there's not enough to go around. They've used it to send it to Mars. Do you think there are Martians up there? Does anybody think they're really Martians?
I do. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, if they're not, how would they come up with a word? I mean, you have to figure out, how did they come up with a word for something that doesn't exist?
Well, the drug companies do that every day.
It's just like smart people. They don't have a word for smart people because they don't exist.
I'm sorry. Wow. David, you usually follow stuff like science and stuff like that. What do you know about what's going on?
I was about to say somebody invented the word God, and then everybody decided he existed. So it's not so hard.
Well, that's a 3-letter word that means an awful lot, unless you're dyslexic, and then it's dog. And that's another topic for another show at another time. So we are going to move on. Let me think. Is there anything else that anybody wants to talk about on what we've already covered? No, great, good. We're moving on. Okay, so one of the highlights of today is we wanted to talk about memorial moments or memorable moments, not memorial moments, otherwise we'd just be talking about RIP, but memorable moments of an experience in our careers. That means
remember
something.
Remember that time when you killed me? You were so bad, Jan.
I'm killing you every day. I tell you, it's amazing. But what I would say to you is that, we all have experiences that stand out in our minds. And I think that it would be very interesting to share some of those moments. And I was wondering if there was anybody that wanted to share any moment that is memorable and that means something to them in their life based on what's happened to you in your career. Is there anybody that'd like to share on something like that? Otherwise, this will be a very short show.
I had a great moment with Bill Graham. And I don't remember if I spoke about it on this or not. But when the Fillmore East was closing down, when Bill Graham gave up on both Fillmores, or at least the Fillmore East, I had been able to get in backstage because of Peter Scher, who's been brought up here before. And I was at the last show, and it was on stage. It was the Allman Brothers. And it was a great show, and it was an amazing evening. And then at the end of the show, everybody cleared out, the band's loaded out, the crews left, all the people who worked there left, and the only people left were a few people on stage, Bill Graham and a couple other people and myself. Somehow I was still there looking at the empty Fillmore East, the legendary Fillmore East, as it was about to be occupied for the last time. And I walked out the door with Bill Graham that night, and it was like a really deep moment for me because the Fillmore was so important in our lives. So I don't remember if I told the story before, but there it is again.
Isn't that where Moon OD'd on the Who night?
What was that?
Wasn't that when the Who played? When the Who played there, isn't that where Moon OD'd and they carried him off the stage and someone came out of the audience and played drums that night?
I don't know. It wasn't that night. The last night was just the Allman Brothers and a couple other bands.
At Fillmore East.
The Fillmore East, yeah. And I was living in New York City, and I was working with that band Mandrill, who had already played the Fillmore East. So because of that, I had a backstage pass that looked like every other backstage pass. So I was able to get backstage to every show after the band played there. So I watched Bob Dylan come out when the band recorded. I watched Frank Zappa record his show there. I just was going to the Fillmore East all the time. Unfortunately, it was only open a few more months after my band played there, and that was the Allman Brothers' last show. I was there when they recorded the album there too. What a great place!
All right, so to David, tell us more about the Fillmore East. I was never there. Was it an auditorium with seats, and how many seats? And because I was at the Fillmore West not all too long ago, maybe 20 years ago or something, and I was surprised to see that it, at the time anyway, didn't have seats. It wasn't a theater. It was more like a club.
Like a ballroom.
Right, more like a ballroom. Yeah. So what was the Fillmore East like?
Was one of those old New York theaters that had 800 seats or something like that. The stage wasn't big. Every time you look at a show on there, it was wall to wall, proscenium to proscenium of band gear. It had a balcony. The lobby, I don't remember being anything special. And, it had the light show from behind with the oil and water mixes and all of that. One of the things that was interesting is that Chaos, John Chester, who's Chaos? John Chester? Anyway, he invented the
intercom guy?
The Clearcom guy. Well, it wasn't Clearcom, but it was a 3-wire device that was rock and roll volume. And they ended up being distributed around the country for a while, and then it just couldn't compete with Clearcom.
I thought it was Bob Goddard.
I don't remember his name. But
it was called Chaos Audio, wasn't it? Yeah.
I mean, the backstage was typical, like one dressing room on the ground floor, and then another couple of dressing rooms on the next level, and a couple of dressing rooms on the level after that. But every show was 3 different bands. It was great. It was a great place to go to see a show. And the second show would start at like 11 o'clock at night, and there were no unions. So they could play till 4 in the morning. It didn't matter, which they did many times.
David, did you ever work at the Capitol Theater in Passaic? Was it similar to that?
Yeah, same thing. I think the Capitol may have been bigger. I don't remember that.
Capitol was about 3,000 seats.
Oh no, that was way bigger. The Fillmore was I don't even know if it made 1,000 seats. Maybe it did.
Oh, interesting.
Much smaller. Plus, it was the Lower East Side of New York. They didn't have stuff that big back then. It was probably a huge theater at one time.
Best thing about the Capitol Theater, for anybody who's been there, when you came off stage, you went about 10 feet up 3 steps, and there was this tiny little walkway where there was just a janitor's closet and the offstage bathroom that anybody over 200 pounds wasn't ever going to fit in. And every artist that would come in there signed the walls in there. Had I known when it was going to be torn down, I would have gone and tried to literally demolish and remove the bathroom intact. But one of the funniest moments ever was sitting on the bowl there, looking above the toilet paper holder, and in girlish handwriting, somebody had written, "If you were my husband, I would have poisoned you." And then in man's Sharpie, guy handwriting, the response was, "If you were my wife, I would have taken it."
Wow, a lot of people, a lot of famous people, a lot of crazy people went in and out of that bathroom, right, Phil?
I saw the Rolling Stones at the Capitol Theater. That was they had that that level of talent. It was unbelievable.
Oh yeah, the Capitol Theater was one of the greatest places to do a gig ever.
I even drove out there from New York to see a show, at least one show.
Even though it wasn't the highlight of what I was going to talk about today of my career, but one of my very, very first shows that I ever went to see when I was 17 years old was the Grateful Dead at the Fillmore East. And we had seats like in the 25th row. Me and my friend Jesse, I remember this really well. We took the subway to get there, and we got there really early. And this old guy, I mean, he was really old. I mean, I was 17, but he looked old. He was probably my age now, maybe older.
He was maybe like 45 or something, huh, Jan?
No, he was older. He was really old. And he came up to me and he said to me, "Hey, you want to change tickets with me? And I said, hey, well, man, I'll tell you, these are really good seats. He says, well, my seats are up in the 5th row. And I says, yeah, I'll trade seats with you. I said, but don't you know it's better to sit in front than back here? He says, well, it's too much noise for me, so I want to sit in the back. I said, well, thanks. He says, you're welcome. I said, how did you happen to have those tickets? He says, I am Mickey Hart's grandfather. And he gave me the seats, and we went down, we watched the Grateful Dead in the 5th row, and it was a highlight, for sure. So I got to see the Grateful Dead at the Fillmore East.
You probably got high just being close to them, huh?
Well, speaking about getting high, so we're sitting in the front row, and this 5th row, right? And I'm getting really thirsty, because everybody's smoking pot, and this guy and this guy's drinking out of this jug of apple juice. And the reason I know, I says, hey, what are you drinking? And he says, it's apple juice. I say, hey, could I have a sip of that? And he says, sure. And I go, he says, hey, careful, man. And as I felt I thought they were apple seeds or apple cores going down my throat. But obviously he said, hey, be careful, man. That's LSD you're drinking. And I've never been the same. Who else has got a memorial story there? Come on, who else wants to talk about something?
I got a good Grateful Dead story. Jeffrey James, who Jan knows, was apparently he was a drummer in San Francisco. He worked with Janis Joplin. Nobody believes anything he ever said because he was a real con artist, but he really did know people, and he knew the Grateful Dead. And so Myrna and I and Jeffrey drove down to San Diego to see the band. The cops in San Diego were like fascists back then. And after the show, we're backstage, and one of the 2 drummers ends up trying to defend somebody who the cops were hassling. And the next thing you know, he gets arrested, and everybody has to go bail him out of jail. So there's a fight backstage, and then the drummer goes to jail. Grateful Dead.
All right, so who wants to share a story? Come on, who else? Who's got a memorable story that they want to share? Somebody in this room's got to have one other than me. I can't be the one with all the story. Ken Porter, come on, tell us a story.
All right. Well, I'd like to hear, what I was kind of thinking is that shows that people have done, or, tours that you've been on that you're disappointed, you're sad that it's over, you wish it would have gone a little longer. My one event thing, I do a bunch of different things that are memorable, but the one I remember that I really wish it wasn't over was in 1997. I was doing the church corporate stuff. Basically, I was doing Promise Keepers. We did the Stand in the Gap in Washington, D.C., where I spent weeks putting together all the stuff for the transmission of audio and everything there. We had 1.4 million people end up on the mall, between the mall, the Washington Monument, and the Ellipse. But by the time, I walked miles that day. They don't have meters. I couldn't tell you how many times I walked the mall because we couldn't run scooters or anything back and forth or get around there. So by the time it was over and I loaded out at night and sat there and like, why don't we still have more show? It just feels like, sad shows that you work hard on, you do a very good job, and then you wish you could do it again. But I was looking at other people and I'm thinking like Chris Carlton and some of the other guys, of what kind of shows you've done that you miss that reason why it was good. There was a lot of people that everybody was into it and the show was really happening. So I'm curious about what other people, what their life experiences have been.
Chris, you want to say something?
Kenny, yeah, I just want to say that, when you were doing the Promise Keepers stuff, I think I was doing RF for Claire Brothers at the time. And it was all about having these 4 different radio stations going in the stadiums so that the Navajos and the Spanish and everybody could get the translation and the hearing impaired going and all that. So, and I was, and Chris Taylor was behind the board, and it was a good time with you and your crew out there. I must say, I met some real good guys out there and enjoyed that a lot.
You did the East Coast runs? I
did a bunch of them all over the place. We did Portland, we did Memphis.
The ones I was on had Dave Morgan a lot of times.
Yeah, I didn't see Dave out there, but I think he was, maybe him and I were tag teaming it. I'm not sure. So, but yeah.
It was East Coast, West Coast. They had 2 different teams.
Uh-huh. Okay. Anyway, you had a great crew out there, and Rusty and Mr. Flat and everybody was all great guys out there. So.
But I wanted to hear some of your stories about ones of Julio, or
Well, can I tell you a little story about, I kind of missed the opportunity to tell the story a few weeks back when we were talking about airplane rides and special landings. And out with Julio, I think it was 1986, if I'm not mistaken, we had leased a C-130, a Hercules C-130 from the Argentine Air Force to do a run in South America and the Caribbean by loading, maybe 16 Clare Brothers S4s and a bunch of band gear and Julio's wardrobe and 3 pallet positions of seats for the crew. And of course, the Argentine Air Force had a big staff of their own. There was like 8 guys, and they wanted to bring their wives. So we had a bunch of guys on board the C-130, and we went from Porto Alegre, Brazil, up to Manaus, up to Venezuela, did a bunch of shows in Venezuela, flew over Dominican Republic, did a show at Casa de Campo. I don't know if you know Alto State Chavan, the amphitheater that they have there. It's a very special place. And at the time, they had a very short runway to where the C-130 had no problem. I mean, that thing was made to land in the jungle in a very short runway, but we landed it there. Julio's jet, I think he had a Gulfstream 5 at the time, it did a touch and go. They didn't quite make the runway, so they had to take off again. He was quite upset after that. Anyway, we did a show. We loaded everything back into the C-130, and it was time to head back down to Buenos Aires. So we're in this plane after working all day and then partying all night, and I'm in the front of the cockpit. They invite me up there to fly into Caracas, and if you've ever flown into Caracas, it's gorgeous. And the windows and the cockpit of a C-130 are huge. Okay, so I'm looking at the Southern Cross coming up in this beautiful bay of Caracas, and we landed there for refueling because the C-130 didn't carry a lot of fuel and it burned a lot of fuel. And we took off from there, went to Manaus on the Amazon, and refueled again there. And shortly after that, we took off, and we're all asleep, and they come back and they're saying, "Hey, what can we do to lighten our load?" The back of the C-130 has the tail that the bottom end will open up, and that's how you push the pallets in there. And this is about the same time that shortly after the movie had come out was The Gods Must Be Crazy, where the guy's going through the Kalahari in his little Piper Cub, throws out a Coke bottle, and it hits one of the natives in the head in Africa, and they don't know what this thing is, where it came from, what to do with it, and they're doing all kinds of stuff like crushing corn with it, having a great time, and then they're fighting over it, of course. So we have visions of, one of the engines had gone out, and another one was smoking. So it was getting a little bit desperate, and they're asking us, what can we push off the back? And so we're thinking that the natives down there are going to be building pyramids out of S4 cabinets and running around with Julio smoking jackets on. But we didn't have to do that. We landed at this beautiful waterfall called Iguazu, and that's where the sunrise was. And I was very happy to have survived that and make my way back down to Buenos Aires. It was about a 24-hour trip, but we made it, and everybody had a good time.
C-130s were designed back in the early 50s when the Eisenhower had come up with the plan for the interstate highway system, and they were worried about the Russians coming in and invading U.S., and the C-130 was designed for the interstate system to where it could take off and land in like 300 feet of interstate, land on and off of interstate.
Yeah, I guess they used them in Nam a lot too, right? To land cargo in very short runways in the jungle.
Yep.
So what happened was we actually tipped the tops of the trees when we took off from Casa de Campo, from San Domingo. I don't know if that caused any damage or not, but something happened to where 2 engines were gone by the time we got down to the middle of Brazil. So
Did you have to dump any gear?
We did not dump any gear. We didn't dump any people. We all stayed on board and had a wonderful breakfast down in on the border of Brazil and Argentina, where this fantastic waterfall is. If you ever have a chance to see this waterfall, it's tremendous.
It's Foz do Iguaçu. It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's absolutely. It's seven waterfalls that come together. It's the largest. Yeah. It's the largest waterfall in the world. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. You know, it's funny, Chris. I'm glad you're alive, and I'm glad you're still here. And there's going to be. We want to share more, but I have to say, you know, I do a joke of the week, and it just happens to be that your story reminded me of a joke. And the joke basically goes where this plane takes off from California, is going to New York, and they're up in the air about 10, 15 minutes. And the pilot comes on and says, ladies and gentlemen, we just lost the use of one engine. No worries. This plane is designed to fly on 3 engines. We're just going to be 2 hours late. About 15, 20 minutes go along. He says, ladies and gentlemen, hate to inform you this, but we just lost a second engine. Nothing to worry about. This plane is designed to fly on 2 engines. We're just going to be 4 hours late. An hour later, the pilot comes up and says, ladies and gentlemen, hate to tell you this, but we've just lost a 3rd engine. Nothing to worry about. This plane is designed to fly on only 1 engine, but we're going to be 8 hours late. And 2 guys are in the back, and one guy says to the other, man, I sure hope nothing happens to that other engine. And his friend says, yeah, otherwise we'll be up here all night. So that's the joke of the week. Okay, Eric, you must have I have a feeling that you definitely have some experience that you want to share. I could just see it. I feel it. I sense it.
You do have to turn your mic on, though, Eric.
This was the time when he did the show for the mutes. That's what it was, you know,
exactly.
Those people that were deaf.
I will come up with a story for next week, but just in case we run out of time, I wanted to bring up that link that I sent to you.
Oh, yes. Talk about that link, and then we'll go back to the stories.
After a very circuitous path, I got an email back from the SBA today, because I've been emailing and encouraging others to email about the shuttered venue operator grants and how it's ignoring the production side of the industry, which is 92% of the industry versus venues, and how it should take care of the venues as well as the service providers. And I got an email back from the New Jersey head of the SBA basically saying, you need to write to the National Ombudsman, if I pronounced that correctly. And she shared a link and said, anything you have to say, this is the best place to say it. So if you want to share that, I think it would behoove everybody here that is interested in, addressing this, sort of issue of not having anything really for the production community at the moment, particularly since somebody said last week that restart is not going to happen, and should be writing in, getting everybody in their contact database to write in, and just keep pounding them with emails every day, as many as you feel up to, or as many as you think you can get others to feel up to.
Okay, well, if you give us the link in the chat, we will post it on our Facebook page. We will post it on our YouTube page. We will post it everywhere. And I recommend that everybody does the same thing on your social media, and we'll get it out there, okay? Because if we all do that, then it'll all happen. And by the way, if you happen to like what you're seeing on Facebook or YouTube, give us the like, give us the thumbs up, and remember to spread the link around so that more and more people can see this as well. So, okay. Who else, something else they want to share? Is there anybody in the room that wants to share something, that a story, an experience, anything along those lines? Ken, you've done your fair share of shows. You've worked with Manilow, you've worked with Julio. You must have some experience in your life that just stands out, other than doing the House of Blues with me.
Well, certainly lots of experiences, but what's going to be interesting to anybody else? I don't know. So,
how about an Anita Baker story?
Oh, well, yeah. I have a great Anita Baker story, because Anita Baker has a reputation for being such an evil person and so mean to all her sound people and everything. And my story is pretty much the contrary of that, right? But it's a pretty long story. So let me I'll save that for next week. Okay, David? But
All right, we'll
but
save that for next week. We'll save.
But the one that I think is nice, short one. I'm doing Shirley MacLaine's sound, which I did starting in 1983, and it's 1984, and we're at the Gershwin Theater in New York City, and it was we were there for like a month or something, and we do the show, and it's just another show, and I thought it was fine and everything, but I get a tap on the shoulder. Hey, mister, after the show's over, he goes, hey, my name is Michael Bennett, and you're a genius. And I was like, wow, that's fantastic. And I don't know if you guys know who Michael Bennett is, but he wrote and directed A Chorus Line, a little Broadway show that was kind of popular in that day. But I was like kind of blown away. And that's really cool when somebody takes the time and, somebody of that, stature comes over to you and tells you that you're doing a good job. That was really cool. So that made a big difference to me at the time.
And I thought you were going to tell the story about how you introduced me to my ex-wife. Oh, well, thank God you didn't tell that story.
Oh, yeah, there's that. Like, well, how about this? Oh, my God.
Thank you, Mr. Manilow. Thank you, Mr. Manilow. I'll tell you, hey, Richard Bevins, I know you've got some stories. I know you must have a story. Is there anything you want to share?
I've got a lot of stories, Jan. I've been truly blessed, as many people in this room, in this chat room, have been, or Zoom room. But I will share one that I actually it's an experience I got to share with someone else in this room. I'm pretty sure he was there. It was a pseudo corporate event. It was at the Schriever Air Force Base in Golden, Colorado, where we did a Ministries of Defense meeting. And it's weird. It's an Air Force base, but there's no runways on that Air Force base. And we were, we had to get quote unquote, secret government clearance, the kind where it's an 8-hour application you have to fill out. And we set up a big tent outside, and then we set up some other stuff inside, running cables in these classified, non-classified trays underneath the floor of their conference room and whatnot. And it was a trip. We were there for, my company was there for over a month. I was there for 3 weeks. And it was just the most bizarre corporate job by far that I had ever done, or most bizarre job, I guess, in general. But it was certainly a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure, Mr. Newman, you were there, were you? Were you not? You were.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah. I managed to get the secret clearance.
I did too.
By the skin of my teeth.
Yeah. So would you agree that it was a pretty freaking bizarre job?
That was definitely a show, if you want to call it that, for the books. Yeah. All I can remember, for some reason, Richard, there's certain things I remember from that gig. And one of them was a really stupid thing that I said to you, asking you to tell David Layton something. And then that was stupid. And then, but for some reason, one of the military guys that was sitting behind one of our 803 or 802 intercom panels, he was confused by it, and he was just really confused by it. And I remember he said something along the lines of, "Oh, this is our comm system is just horrible," or something like that, And we had gone to great lengths to make it be as great as it could be, and he was just not happy at all about the comm system, and it was interesting.
Yeah, we actually brought in Tony Kramer from Las Vegas at the time.
Really
he was the guy. And on that job, it's funny, we sent one semi of gear from Orange County, and we had so much FedEx coming in that the hotel actually dedicated a hotel room for all of our FedEx that came in every day. And then we had 3 semis going home. That's how much FedEx. And cable for days.
At the time, that was probably one of the, if not the largest or most money-making or most something gig that Video Apps had done, right?
Yeah, we spent so much on CapEx on that. It all washes out. But yeah, it was a big job for sure. So anyway, that's my story. I shared that mostly because Ken was in the room, and it was bizarre. It was just the most bizarre corporate job ever, if you want to call it corporate. I guess
because it was kind of military, government / corporate / international. It was lots of things in one. It was very bizarre.
Yeah, as an example of how bizarre it was, we had to set up 120 self-powered speakers all the way around the tent outside and run pink noise away from the tent during the meeting, so anyone with a laser microphone could not listen in on the meeting. And the tent was it blocked infrared. They had literally had armed guards on top of the tent, and we were in a very secure, the most secure place I'd ever been. And yeah, you had to have the right kind of clearance, or you were not. They would weigh you every day before you went in, and God forbid you weighed more when you were leaving that place, because you were looking down the barrel of an M16, and we saw it multiple days. I saw a camera guy who had a pass for a camera, but didn't have a pass to take pictures, and he was spread up against the wall with a couple of M16s at his back. It was a daily occurrence, stuff like that. It was a lot of fun.
So evidently they didn't feed you well, right? Because if they were weighing you.
Oh, they fed us really well and really cheap. It was fantastic. I remember that. That's what I do remember that too.
Yeah.
When Richard was explaining that about the weighing, that reminded me of how great the food was. They had like a cafeteria. Well, I guess they called it a staff cafeteria or something.
Commissary.
It was great. It was commissary, right? It was great.
If you actually came out, say, with a laptop that you didn't go in with, and you weighed 5 pounds more, and you would go into this it was like a phone booth. They would weigh you, and it hit the right number in order to get in, and you were locked in there until they wanted to let you out. And if they wanted to hold you there, they would.
And it was before 9/11, obviously, right?
And then actually, no, I bet you it was after.
But the interesting thing was, what tell us about, because I don't really remember exactly what it was, but tell us about the overall reason for the gig. Wasn't it just simply to prove that this technology would do a certain thing?
No, what it was it ended up not being a quote unquote secret event, because it was in magazines and whatnot. But it was when the NATO Army was being established or being introduced, the first NATO sanctioned army of all the different NATO countries were going to have their own army or armed forces, and they were showing the ministers of defense. They actually ran this mock takeover. Guerrillas come in and take over a country or whatever. So they ran this whole mock thing using reporters, and that was also very complicated. The video playback system, because they had 10 scenarios depending on how the questions were answered. We had screens everywhere for these guys to see. But so they were trying to show the ministers of defense that how quickly these decisions had to be made. Do you deploy these people? How quickly, how do you deploy them? And then the thing that we were doing inside was a carbon copy of what was set up outside. It was a command center for that. At least that's how I recall it. So you're right, Ken. It probably was before 9/11, maybe just a few years. So, but it was a trip. And then during the show, you couldn't get up to go to the bathroom. If you remember that, Ken, I had to beg and plead to get the escort to go to the bathroom.
Sounds familiar. Definitely, that was definitely a bizarre one.
Yeah.
Did they have dogs sniffing around to make sure that
they had everything? They poured this 200-foot by 300-foot concrete pad just for the tent. That's the other thing that I remember going inside the building, the actual Missile Defense Agency building. They had a hallway that went around the whole outside of the building, and then when you went inside the building, it's like you're on a ship where you had to step over these two little things, and these watertight doors would close, and it was a lead-lined building, literally, because the radios that we had outside, as soon as you went inside that building and that door closed, your radio, nothing, it was just gone. So you just same with your cell phone. I'm sure we had cell phones back then, probably $1 a minute days, but yeah, it was the whole thing was just something else.
Yeah, it was in September of 2003, so I guess it was after 9/11. I just looked it up. Yeah,
there you go.
I guess that's where the expression comes from. If I tell you about this gig, I'm going to have to kill you.
Yeah, it was close to that. Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. It reminds me of somewhat when I did some shows where the president would be in a room, which always is one of the things that I really despise, because when they were ready to run those dogs through the room, that room was empty except for them. And that always made it a challenge to prepare a show when you were dealing with with the president of the United States, which I always dreaded doing. It was just too much pressure. What a time sensitive job that is. And if you don't have it together by the time they're ready to seal that room off, it's just not going to come together.
Oh
Yep,
yeah, same
that's
thing.
right.
Same thing with this thing. Yeah.
So does anyone else thank you so much for sharing, Richard. Does anyone else have anything that they want to share right now? Or is it my turn?
Well, I mean,
Well-
I have a little anecdote that's along the same lines of what Richard just shared. I'm doing a corporate job for this company that some of you might have heard of, some of you might not. They're called Palantir Software Security. They make the software backend that the NSA uses. They make some of the software that Edward Snowden did the big expose on. The very, very intense surveillance software that runs the back end of our government. So we're doing this show for these folks. And I mean, probably not as secure as what I'm hearing about this video apps job, but a pretty darn secure situation with a lot of confidential information happening. And, it was pretty seriously locked down gig. Anyway, the show finishes. At the end of loadout, the client had supplied a bunch of the stagehands and camera operators and a bunch of the people to sort of keep stuff under their umbrella. And so at the end of the loadout, we're looking for a remote control for a television. And I'll be damned, we're looking everywhere for this remote control for the television because we have to return the sub-rented television. We don't want to get dinged $50 for the remote. We're looking everywhere. We open up, we're looking at all the Pelicans. We open up a Pelican. A camera case. We open up this camera case. Inside the camera case is a sandbag. One of the stagehands had taken the camera body, walked off the job site. And supposedly this most secure project anywhere, one of these client-provided camera guys just walked away with a full-on broadcast camera body. Yeah, a HXC 100 camera body, probably $50,000 camera body.
So was this at Moscone Center?
No, this was at Palantir's headquarters in Palo Alto. Yeah, I know. Moscone Center, there was a guy who built a whole fly pack out of stolen stuff, a security guy.
There was someone that took it that on a coffee break, someone stole a full production camera from front of house on a coffee break.
With the lens, you mean? And when you say full, like the
Yeah,
lens and
the
everything.
whole thing. The camera came
damn
back,
it.
his camera was gone.
Oh my God!
Yeah, no, they have
Well, that reminds me. That reminds me of the Javits story that you always hear when you go to work at Javits, right?
about the boat on the elevator.
Yeah, about the boat. Do you want to tell the story, Richard? Go for it.
No, go ahead.
No, you probably know it better than me.
I think it's folklore, actually. Honestly.
Oh, I doubt that. It's because the reason you hear it is because that's the reason the IA is not the main union at the Javits Center any longer.
Absolutely
right?
correct.
Okay, so you know the story then, Eric? Yeah.
That the other one was then they also found at one of the dental conventions, somebody had stolen an entire X-ray suite and had hidden it in the building. So the IA was in.
Big money.
And then they got booted out, and then the IBEW was in there, and it's been there since then, and it's it's one of the worst crews in the country to work with.
If not the worst. Yeah, right. Oh, just horrible.
This is where I will add that everything that we say is an opinion.
This is my opinion. My opinion. Some guys love that crew, but
and you must do your own fact checking on that, right?
I don't know, man. The IBEW, they're just not into it. They're not knowledgeable, and they don't want to be knowledgeable. So, like, what more could go wrong?
We were doing a show at the Century Plaza one time, and it was a pretty big gig, and there wasn't any room backstage or in the green rooms on the bottom floor. And where the wings are, you can go upstairs, and there's rooms up there, like dressing rooms. So we had graphics and video, and this was in the 80s. A lot of big honking computers of stuff back there, early 80s. And the second night, we came in the next morning, and all the computers had been stolen. So of course they ran to Best Buy and bought new computers and then took them back after the show, I'm sure. But I'm sure you've heard stories about that. But anyway, so what we ended up doing is we put a lighting pole in each room and a lipstick camera, one little tiny camera up on a pole. 2 days later, they all came back to do it again, got them all on tape. With hotel employees. Because, you know, nobody locked their computers down because all
probably the security department employees.
Yeah, security and some house.
Oh my God, that's what you call an inside job, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot of those floating around.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah,
It's a happy ending. You know, I was going to tell a different story, but you mentioned the Century Plaza. I don't know how many shows I did at Century Plaza, because when I was producing shows, what I would do is I would produce the kind of shows, I would be the technical producer for multi-talented events. So they had celebrity performing. They would always have to share equipment. And my personality, believe it or not, would be able to keep some of these people in line. And I remember working for Debbie Reynolds, and she did this show called the Thalians Ball, and it was every year they had a Mr. Wonderful or Mrs. Wonderful, and I got to meet and got to work with Lucille Ball, Angela Lansbury, George Burns. But one year, Jimmy Stewart was Mr. Wonderful. And I had just released the crew, and Jimmy Stewart wasn't supposed to be there till 8 o'clock. This was at 6. And I get a call on my walkie-talkie from the kitchen that there's some guy walking around in the kitchen that mentioned my name, and I thought I should come out. So I come out there, and sure enough, there he is, bigger than life. Jimmy Stewart, 6 o'clock, 2 hours before the show. And I said, Mr. Stewart, what are you doing here? We was going to send a car for you. And, you know, I wish I could do a Jimmy Stewart voice, because this story would sound so much better if I could do that. And we started talking, and then I was so blown away that he was there. He turns to me, says, do you think we can go someplace else to talk other than the loading dock of the kitchen of the Century Plaza? I said, sure. So I took him to his dressing room. And I said, and then I was going to walk out, and he says to me, he says, do you think you could stay for a little while? And I said, of course I could stay. And I got to spend 45 minutes with Jimmy Stewart talking about life. And that was one of the highlights of my life. And this guy, I got to tell you about Jimmy Stewart. He did not know that he was a megastar. Not at all. But I will leave you with just this part about the story. Did you know? So I said to the guy, I said, you know, you're in my favorite movie of all time. And he looked at me and smiles and says, Harvey? And I said, no. He says, yeah, I know. It's a Wonderful Life. He says, you know, I turned that movie down 3 times. I said, you're kidding. And he says, no. He says, do you know who was originally, does anybody in the room know who was originally cast in that movie instead of Jimmy Stewart? It was Humphrey Bogart. It was Humphrey Bogart, but because he was doing the African Queen, he had a stroke, and they because he was under contract with, I guess, Warner Brothers at the time, they made him do the movie, and that's the story. He turned it down, and if they didn't force him into doing the movie, probably you know, it wouldn't be my favorite movie. So that's my story for today. Anybody else want to have anything to say? Anybody that has
just about that movie? It was not a hit when it came out. It became part of America's history after the copyright ran out, and the TV stations found that they could run it for free, and so they started running it around Christmas or Thanksgiving or whenever it is, and the rest of the country picked up on it. It became the huge hit that it is, but in the beginning it didn't do well at all.
Hey, Jan.
Didn't know that. Ken.
Has anybody heard from our friend in Austin? Is he okay? You know, I haven't seen him on in the house today. I didn't know if it heard him.
Paul Wallace. Yeah, Paul Wallace.
He's got to have power to get online.
He might not. He probably doesn't have power.
I don't know. This guy dances to a different drummer, you know, so basically he probably has his own generator. He probably, you know, at one point in time, he was, you know, like the #1 computer salesman of all of Texas. And he sold, like, you know, he sold everybody a computer. So I'm sure he's okay. I think John Preto's in the room. John, did you see Paul today?
I didn't have my mic set up. We have not seen Paul in 3 days. It's funny you said that because we were just talking about him today on office hours. I'm going to send him an email. I have his phone number too. I'll reach out to him and find out how he's doing.
Yeah,
I've
I
talked
hope
to
he's
other
okay.
people in Austin that are friends with Paul. We all met on Blab 6 years ago, and they're all doing fine. So Paul's the only one I haven't talked to yet.
Yeah, I worry about it because I heard that, well, I'm not going to say what I heard, but I know that I now had to put my silicone sex doll away because there's been major hacks and they could kill you. They could actually kill you now. So I'm alone again. Unbelievable. Damn. Oh, well. Just remember, everything you hear is an opinion. It might be true. It might not. But that's it for us. So does anybody else want to say anything before we say goodbye to those people who are watching us on Facebook and YouTube? And then we could talk about them in this room. Anybody at all want to say anything? Just now's the time. That's it. All right, you guys out there in TV land, just remember we'll be back here next Wednesday, same time, same place. Remember to click the like button. Remember to tell your friends about this. And remember, you make it happen. Be safe and stay healthy and stay warm. Because, hey, campers, it's cold outside. And we will see you again next week. So stay safe and stay healthy. Until then.